Thank you for joining us with another installment of Bad Dinner Guests. This is Lou.
What's up? I'm Kev.
And I'm Nathan.
And tonight we're going to be talking some interesting theories and conspiracies of what really transpired for the Oklahoma City bombing.
That was really good, by the way. I just want to stop and just say nice work. That was the most professional we have ever sounded, so naturally I had to jump right in and ruin it.
I think that's the best intro I've ever personally done for anything.
That was quality. It's a job well done.
Thank you. I'm going to pat myself on the back.
You should. And
thank you for taking your hat off to me.
Nathan should also pat himself on the back. I don't know if we gave him enough credit last week.
I'll pat something for him.
Now we have just gone downhill on the professional.
Yeah, which was great.
I put the bad in Bad Dinner Guests.
We needed to get back to our normal level of things. So now that everyone's comfortable again, Nathan, I wanted to give you some credit. I don't know if we made the point last week that these topics sort of came upon from you from just normal social media interaction, but you put the bug in our ear to do a Waco Ruby Ridge video, which we did last week, and we ended up, there was no way we weren't going to tie it to Oklahoma City because that's sort of where that leads. So I kind of want to maybe see if you don't mind starting this bad boy off for us. What are your thoughts? I mean, we should probably go over the official story, right, guys?
Yeah.
Most people know the official story.
Give a little synopsis here.
Do you want me to do it?
I can
I would love for Nathan to do it.
I would love for Nathan to do it as well. I want to make
sure. So basically, Timothy McVeigh, especially. I see what you mean now about Lou. Lou, for all of you viewers, Lou is looking at me with this weird face, like he's tuning into Santa when he's like 4 years old. So
little bit.
So anyway, to get back to here, Timothy McVeigh, through the early 1990s, he started to become very anti-government, very pro-Constitution. Now that's very loosely because he ended up bombing the building, but him and Terry Nichols ended up making some fertilizer bombs and rented a Ryder truck to the Alfred P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City and ended up blowing up the building on, what was it, April 20th?
April 19th, 1995. Okay. Patriots Day.
Yep.
Also 2 years to the day that the Waco took place, and what was his name? Snell. Another random side note before I let you take back over.
Okay.
Oh, where did he go? Mr. Snell. I'm gonna have to find his first name again. There was the guy who originally attempted to blow up the Murrah building in 1983 was put to death on April 19th, 1995. He was put down in Arkansas. Just a random thing.
The same day, though.
The exact same day that the Murrah building was blown up, a man who attempted to do it before was put to death. So I'll let you continue.
And I should clarify, because Columbine also happened, on the day after, on the 20th. Now that was 4 years later. I always weirdly mess up those dates. So
fair enough. Yeah, I completely understand that.
They're both big history things here. But
we were all relatively young when those happened too, though.
Oh yeah.
So.
I mean, I wasn't even 3 yet when the Murrah building was blown up. But basically ended up killing 168 people, and I believe of those 168, 19 were children. He has stated, and we'll go into this a little bit more, he has stated he didn't necessarily know that there was a daycare center in the building.
And typically that's something you wouldn't really know unless you worked there, type of deal.
Yeah, I've also seen stuff where people have speculated that there's no way he shouldn't have not known that, especially with it being on the ground floor, which I believe it was. And he was later pulled over for not having a license plate and was arrested for that and his getaway car, and then they eventually connected him back to the bombing. And fun fact was why was I going to say exterminate? I guess it's the same thing as executed. It's here. but it was executed in my home state. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah, just very fun fact. It was about a stone's throw from where I grew up in our home state. Terre Haute, Indiana. I was there. I grew up maybe a 15-minute drive from where they put Timothy McVeigh down. It was it was almost sadly like a claim to fame. Those were the two things Terre Haute had. We had Larry Bird in the 80s and Timothy McVeigh. Those are the two things Southern Indiana is known for. So this was something that since my childhood that I have thought at least that I knew a decent amount about. And the more you start to look into things through documentaries such as The Noble Lie, James Corbett, The Corbett Report, did a great
Secret
documentary called The Secret Life of Timothy McVeigh. And that's sort of we'll be walking those lines. So people listening, watching along, we are going to be kind of testing the waters with this one, poking some holes here and there, bringing up different theories and aspects of it that we have heard, and just trying to figure this one out, because I know people may be sitting here thinking, well, this is old news, why are we talking about it? But the Omnibus Act that was turned into the anti-terrorism bill, which was quoted by President Clinton in '96 when he signed it, he quoted saying that this was a direct result of the Oklahoma City bombing.
Okay.
A lot of the things that we are dealing with, for instance, without this was the precursor to the Patriot Act, which is a precursor to what's going on now. So in order for you to understand the world that you currently inhabit, it is nice to know how we got here and how the steps that are taken after these initial processes are made, after these, what some would call invasions into privacy, because these acts, this Omnibus Act, the anti-terrorism bill, these were all staunchly fought and protested by the American people. We did not want this, especially after Ruby Ridge and Waco. People did not trust the government. They especially didn't trust any of the alphabet agencies.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, a lone wolf nut comes along and attacks the ATF, who, by the way, had no one in the building that day. The official story is that they had 5 of their employees there that day, and that the reason being because the rest of the office worked late the night before. And so that's why none of them were there. That's why none of their children were there at the daycare where they usually stay. And so
it's a hell of a coincidence.
It's a hell of a coincidence that, and that's why we're sort of diving into it, because all of a sudden then the people changed their mind. They were scared. This bill wasn't signed overnight, but it was changed. It was renamed. It got a new stamp put on it. It was signed a year later. And people who had up until that point fought for their rights were willing to then hand them over because a lone nut white dude blew up a government building. And so, and it was a much different brand of terrorism. Now at that point, the 93 World Trade Center bombing had happened. So we were terrorism wasn't a brand new concept to the Americans, but
domestic terrorism.
And there you go.
Is the game changer.
And it's a big one there.
I would like to correct a statement earlier. The daycare center was on the second floor.
Yes.
Okay. On the first floor.
It was on the second floor. And I missed that one too. I did not correct you on that one. Been watching a whole lot about this lately, but the second floor. But still, whether or not he knew about the daycare,
kind of regardless,
it's sort of sad to say. Innocent lives are innocent lives.
Right.
So,
I will say one of his co-conspirator, Terry Nichols, has stated that they knew there was a daycare center and then that they really didn't care. So you have the one person who was executed saying he didn't know, but then obviously his co-conspirators said they knew and didn't care anyway.
Well, Terry Nichols, it should be noted, his disposition is very interesting. I mean, here's a guy who's never getting out of jail, and he has been quoted as saying that all of the knowledge that I have in regarding to this could never get out because, and I don't want to paraphrase the entire quote, but it gets to a point where he said it's the others unknown. He said, especially in regards to there are certain details of this case that will never come out, especially in regards to the others unknown involved in the case, and which you look into what he's saying, he's kind of saying a lot there, that there are people involved. And that's something we haven't even touched on this yet. And you missed one thing I would say maybe that you might have missed in the official story was the 3-month manhunt, the largest manhunt in FBI history for the so-called John Doe number 2.
Yeah.
Which was eventually called off basically saying, oh, we messed up, guys. This dude doesn't exist. We know that there were 24 eyewitness accounts of seeing him with McVeigh that morning and an apparent video, which, again, how these coincidences, folks, we can't continue to believe these coincidences that we see. Case in point, the Pentagon, all of the surrounding buildings that could have shown us a plane flying into the Pentagon, somehow all of that camera footage is lost. All of the cameras across the street from the Murrah building that should show us Tim McVeigh, and only Tim McVeigh, getting out of a Ryder truck.
Show him with another man.
They supposedly show him with another man, but also we're not seeing them.
Yep.
They're claiming that they're lost, or that, all the tapes. I mean, we see a bunch of different examples. Depending on what disaster it is, we hear things like, oh, all the tapes were resetting at that time, and there's a 30-minute window where they don't record, so we can change the tapes, and it took place during that window. Or we lost them, we can't find them.
Well, which story is it?
That's what I'm saying. It's always a variety of one of these stories, but it's always the same sort of just bullshit.
Swan song.
We just can't find it. We would give it to you guys if we could find it.
Kind of like how the ISS always mysteriously shuts its cameras down when anomalies enter the field.
Oh, you mean when squids fly up next to the boat that they're in the ocean?
Unconfirmed targets. Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. To get real tinfoil on you here for a second, one of my favorites is the theory that all space footage is actually shot in giant swimming pools. That's a great theory that we won't touch on today, but someday I want to come back to.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Space being fake. I don't want to get too off topic, but I will repeat it for you. I think it'd be fun for us to talk about the idea that all of our space footage is faked, and that a lot of the stuff that they film is like actually being filmed underwater.
Oh my god!
And stuff like that.
Is that why there's not other stars in it?
And then they show.
We'll have to dive into that.
Air bubbles is where they go. They point out air bubbles floating and what's supposed to be in space. So yeah, one we really need to dive in some other time. We spent a lot of time researching them. Yeah, get it? Pun intended. Boom.
There you go.
Speaking of dives, so Timothy McVeigh may have taken a dive here. He may have taken one for the team. He clearly didn't speak on his co-conspirators.
Oh no.
We should point out is very odd. So he passed up on any attempts to
forfeited his appeals.
Forfeited all of his appeals, and worked tirelessly on one request, a very unique request that was inevitably granted to him. That was he requested that there be no autopsy, which he is
to be immediately cremated.
And he is the only such inmate on death row to have that request granted, which feeds into the idea of where stories like the Corbett Report go with The Secret Life of Timothy McVeigh, the idea that Timothy McVeigh was more of a Lee Harvey Oswald sheep-dipped intelligence asset than he was some redneck racist.
Right.
That he was... Well, the term is sheep-dipped, and we've talked about this before. If you listened to us last week, you're familiar, but the easiest way to break it down, if you have seen Martin Scorsese's The Departed, picture Leonardo DiCaprio, okay? He's, for those of you who don't, I'm going to have to just explain it a long way anyway. Leo is applying to be a state trooper. He scores very highly on his tests. He has a secret meeting with the undercover cops in which, they tell him it's going to look as if he's been released from the States, that he failed his training. He's going to take an assault charge. He's going to actually physically do the time.
Yeah.
And then when he comes back, he will be just a street thug, and only 2 people in the entire department know that he's actually a cop. And so, long story short, that is what sheep dipping essentially is. It would be take that act, apply that in the story to a military operation, and just imagine someone pretending to fail a spec ops trial and then coming back into the world as a citizen. And
that's funny. Didn't he fail his special forces?
He did, yeah. After
Allegedly?
the Gulf War, he was a sergeant. He went from private to sergeant in 2 years. Was given a couple of different citations, the good kind. What was it? Bronze Star. I can't remember off the top. Oh yeah, Bronze Star.
Bronze Combat Star.
Yep. And was accepted to try out for the Special Forces, according to a letter that he wrote to his sister that was covered by major news sources. He claimed to be one of 10 people in his unit who's out of 400 that were there for Special Forces. He told his sister that 10 Social Security numbers were called out, and his was one of them. Nathan, did you read that letter?
I have not seen that letter. I have not gotten a link for it. I don't know if you saw a link somewhere.
I can get one sent over to you. But so when this was covered, I believe by the Washington Post, what they covered these letters that Tim McVeigh wrote to his sister, and then had this sort of whitewash statement afterward that all it simply said in parentheses, the government has always denied such allegations. Which, first of all, what a blanket statement. Like, you're not even saying it, like some unidentified entity representing the government. They're not even saying CIA, Army, no one. It said the government has always denied such acts. So it shows you that they probably didn't even bother to fact check. They're like just trying to write this one off. But in a letter he wrote to his sister, he claimed that he would be hired CIA assassins, that his job would be to smuggle drugs and guns in the name of, acquiring assets for the United States military, and that, their part of their job would be to silence people. And he even mentioned in the letter, we would be paid CIA assassins, So that is what sort of opened up this whole theory that he was more than what he claimed. That, and John Paul Hammer, his former cellmate, claiming that Tim McVeigh would tell him up until his death that he wasn't going to die, that a man named the Major was going to inject him with something that would make it look like he was dead, and then he'd be ushered out of the building and revived at a later point, and then be rewarded for his service to his country. And it just makes you wonder, did this guy snap because of what happened to him at war and his failure, or was he a really well-groomed intelligence officer that maybe thought he was part of a sting operation and then realized too late that he was the patsy and knew better than to go against it? Or was he, because to me that part doesn't make sense either, because he sat there and took it in jail. He never tried to right what was wrong, and never really, he definitely showed remorse. And you can't say, if you watched his interview on CNN, which coincidentally enough, it is impossible to find. Did you guys try finding this? Because I tried. No. And this was another part that bothered me. If you look for his interview, his 60-minute interview, the longest you're going to find is a 3-minute clip of it.
And the show's called 60 Minutes.
Yeah. And so it bothered me that in today's day and age, that, I'm sure I could torrent it, I'm sure I could download it, but for me to not be able to quickly find it, as Nathan, the producer extraordinaire, probably will find it working his 2 cell phones over here and really make me look like an ass. But in general,
I found one for 12 minutes.
12 minutes, okay, but again, it's going to be at least a 40 minutes.
That's a documentary. That's not his interview.
And see, it's hard to find the actual interview, but you can find a clip where he does show some remorse for what he's done as far as the children. He doesn't he doesn't even claim any remorse, though, in the fact that basically his version of it is innocent people die in war. That's how it happens. That's what has to happen.
I found a BBC interview.
BBC. Okay. Well, yeah. So, just sort of bring us back here.
Okay.
Timmy was involved in the Army. So what we know that much. We know that he was in the Gulf War. When the Gulf War was over, he was assigned bodyguard duty. Then he was called back to try out for the Special Forces. The official story is that he failed physically due to the strain that was put on his body in the Gulf War, that he failed the physical test due to
body mass and all that,
due to an ankle injury, and while carrying.
Well, and I have a point here. Let me see if I can find it. I have this article up here. His dad asked his sister at one point. Not his dad, excuse me. There's this paragraph in the article. It's like, why would Tim, characteristically non-drinker, super successful in the Army, private to sergeant in 2 years, Top Gun, Bronze Star, accepted in the Special Force, all of a sudden come home, party hard, and just like that announce that he was not only disillusioned by Special Forces, but was in fact leaving the service. And then he said, and then the paragraph after this has stated, it talks about him and the 9 others would be ordered to help the CIA fly drugs into the U.S. to fund covert operations and be government paid assassins. So
there you go, and that is an excerpt from his letter to his sister right there. Yes. So what? Let's keep the tin foil in the kitchen for now and just go along with the official story and see. Okay, so what happened next? So he fails the Special Forces, and
what year would that have been? Do we have that at hand?
He's supposed to be out. I like how you have a knack for answering asking the questions that we aren't prepared for in the moment.
He was out before
Ruby Ridge, right?
Yes, because he got a email/mail from the Department of Defense in February of '93, saying that he had been overpaid by $1,058 while in the Army, and he was asked to repay it. So I think he's been out before that. I think '92.
And you need to watch, if you watch The Secret Life of Timothy McVeigh, one of his arguments was there is actual footage from a film crew that was in Camp Grafton, North Dakota in '93, where Tim McVeigh had just parked a tank of the guy that they alleged was Tim McVeigh. And the whole point of this argument was this was supposedly around 2 years after he had been discharged. And what was he doing in his fatigues driving a tank?
Right.
And that Camp Grafton also at that time was a place where people were trained in explosives. So that part of the conspiracy theory that gets brought in by The Secret Life gets brought up there. So in the early '90s, he's discharged, and from there,
December 31st, 1991.
Because it was from like '88 to '91, and the red flag there is that military tours are usually 4 years. You know, even if he would have failed the Special Forces, he would have still had to have obliged by the details of his contract and fulfilled the 4 years. You're not just out. That's where I think most people find the basis of the sheep dipping.
Yeah, but I think on that too is right at the end there. He was in right at the end of the first Gulf War, though. So that may be a thing, you know.
He could have got the battle points.
Well, I'm just talking devil's advocate on this here. It may be a thing where it ended, and quote unquote peacetime. So while he didn't get in the Special Forces, it may have been just a thing where, oh well, you're not really needed because we're not in war per se. So just to play devil's advocate.
It's true, but it's still odd.
Yeah.
And so where he went from there, because it is odd, and it only gets more odd because where he goes from there is there's reports of him hanging out in Aryan circles under the name Tim Tuttle, selling guns and selling the Turner Diaries, which is a fictional book written by white supremacists in which essentially the theme of the story is they start bombing federal buildings and this white power movement overthrows its tyrannical government. And they do so by bombing federal buildings and stuff like that. And so right around
that's really funny that you go to these volatile fucking people like skinheads and you give them a book like that, expecting that they won't fucking emulate that shit.
Well, and that's what the people on the other end would argue. That will say that that Tim McVeigh was a PatCon operative. PatCon standing for the Patriot conspiracy. It's it's the idea that the CIA was trying to infiltrate certain right-wing groups in the same way that they tried to infiltrate the Black Panthers back in the day, the way that they successfully infiltrated and maybe even started the hippie movement. That they were looking out at these right-wing groups, and the whole reason we had to do this as a sister conversation with Ruby Ridge and Waco is it essentially you should start to see the themes now. If you listened last week and you're listening now, you see a lot of white supremacist gun right stuff all being used together in these situations where the supposed story of the undercover agent Tim McVeigh sort of fits when you apply what you know about Randy Weaver and about there being an undercover operative being the guy who asked him to buy the guns, who got him pinched, and then they come back and they try to turn him into an informant. And so
Spycraft 101.
Whether or not you believe, yes, it's Spycraft 101, but the average person
doesn't know shit like that.
Yeah, is only going to their Spycraft 101 is what they've seen on James Bond.
Yeah.
So you have to remember that when we discuss these issues. It's very easy for those who can see through this to be like, how the hell can you not see through it? But a lot of people, unfortunately or fortunately, they choose to see the good in people, and they choose to believe that the world revolves around their moral compass. And not only does the world not revolve around their moral compass, but most people are unfortunate enough to find out that they don't even follow their own moral compass when push comes to shove. Right. So this whole thing here, the coincidences are odd.
No, I just, sorry, I had to laugh because that whole moral compass thing, it's just that's kind of been a theme over this weekend. We watched The Killing Joke the other day and Suicide Squad today. Sorry.
Yeah.
Nihilism is running rampant.
Yeah.
And one thing I would like to clarify, well, not clarify, but state here is, he started becoming as soon as he left the Army line, he started to become increasingly anti-government. He was very into the gun show culture, gun rights and stuff. In fact, he was at Waco distributing anti-government pamphlets and stuff along those lines.
But a lot of these times,
address.
Yeah, too.
After Waco, he was addressing that. But
what else he was selling out there?
What?
The Turner Diaries.
Huh.
So, but again, he was there.
Yeah.
And that's another reason that we talk about this. Like it was supposedly done in result, as a direct result, as a response to what was done to the people at Ruby Ridge and Waco. And he was there, and there is film footage of him being interviewed as a bystander there. So again, no matter what, but see, that's one of those pieces of evidence all too familiar in the world of conspiracy, where it's like the same piece of evidence is used to argue both sides. It's like the flat earthers, the same test that you use, the same sun and stick test that people use to prove that the earth is round is the very same test that the flat earthers use to prove that we're on a plane, because they argue that the sun is closer than the globe earthers argue. So you see what I'm saying? Where it's like one piece of evidence is used to fuel both sides of the argument.
Right.
What definitely, though, I definitely don't think could be argued is obviously the fact that, and it wasn't necessarily as much of Ruby Ridge as Waco, but also the fact that they used CS gas at Waco. The fact that he had been in the military and also been exposed to it, and the effects also put him over that tipping point, because he finally decided. Now, it took 2 more years, but it finally decided to make some sort of action towards the government due to what happened at Waco.
Well, but I mean, we're talking about a substance that was eventually banned from warfare. So, yet the government felt more than free to throw it in our faces. Well, I shouldn't say our faces, but people's faces that they call citizens.
Well, and then not to open up that whole can of worms again, but something that Janet Reno and Tim McVeigh had in common was they both claimed essentially what they did was either to protect or, in Tim's case, to avenge the children. And look at who paid the price.
The children.
Janet Reno claimed that what the actions that were taken were done in order to save those children and get those children out of there before their maniacal parents put them all to death. And then instead, they all were put to death. And then Tim McVeigh, in his outrage to these innocent women and children being killed, goes and blows up a building in which 20 children are crushed. Sorry for my rounding, but 19 children are crushed.
Can I point out, now this is just more about I would like to point out 3 actions he did after Waco. Now, they may not necessarily have a connection to down the road, but I was just, the mindset, I think it spells more about the mindset he was, in, which led him to this. Like, for example, he sold ATF hats that had bullet holes in them, so like fake bullet holes. He also handed out pamphlets about what he considered open warfare on American people, and how he compared the Waco shootout to memory of Warsaw 43, which, if you don't know what I mean by that, is the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising.
Yeah.
Where
they killed everybody.
Oh yeah, and then that's when he started experimenting with pipe bombs and things along those lines. But for me, the fact that he wants to compare Waco to the Ghetto Uprising,
right?
I mean, you see that that's just, I don't know who he would have necessarily also talked to about that. He did hand out pamphlets about it, but to compare that, to see the mindset. I know it's hard to call stuff in on people just based upon that. I mean,
right?
Freedom of speech and all. But to see that as, that's definitely a what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like a forward, things along those lines.
Foreshadowing?
Foreshadowing. I was on the right path there.
Right.
Showing that it's a premeditated sort of thing, that there was a build here. So I see where you're going with that, and I definitely, I can't argue against it. Now, the thing that I want to bring up that we haven't touched on yet at all of this entire conspiracy is the Elohim City connection. Which is one of the bigger parts, one of the things that a lot of people kind of forget about. But if you're on the side of Tim McVeigh was an asset, or this was an inside job, people knew that this was going on. There is a lot of people out there. There are a lot of people out there that believe Tim McVeigh thought that a lot of people that believe that Tim McVeigh believed he was going undercover to try to do a sting on Elohim City, which essentially was another Waco type.
Yeah.
Except imagine a Waco where everyone is a white separatist, a white supremacist, essentially. And what was interesting, if one of you guys gets a chance to look up the name, I cannot remember Snell's first name, but this guy.
How do you spell Snell's?
Snell. So this guy Snell, who was one of 2 people who first attempt to blow up the Murrah building in 1983. Now, so when the reason this attempt failed, guys, is they originally planned to create a bomb and put the bomb in the building. And then one of the 2 came up with the idea of, let's just build a sort of a grenade launcher. I can't remember. Richard Snell, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, because members of the white supremacist group, the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord, plotted to park a van to blow it up with rockets detonated by a timer.
Yeah, and so that was the original plan. Then the second plan was for them to build sort of a rocket launcher. And the plan only was stopped when the rocket launcher went off in their hand as they were building it. Yep. And then so they took that, because they believed they were on a mission of God, they took that as a sign from God to let them know that they were on the wrong path. So now Richard Snell, who was put down on April 19th, 1995, the same day, upon his request, was buried in Elohim City.
Okay.
Which the connection now Tim McVeigh, when he was first asked about Elohim City, he said he had no connection to it, never been there.
Spell that, by the way.
It's like in the Bible, Elohim.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a Bible term. If you remember the Nephilim and the Elohim, basically talking about the early race of humans. Nephilim being like, what's his name? Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
Goliath was part of the Nephilim, the giants.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, so Elohim City, Richard Snell was buried there. The man who was put to death the same day as the Oklahoma City bombing. So right there, sort of a big connection. A guy who tried to bomb it the first place,
Right.
gets put there. Now, there was Nate. Actually, if one of you guys can do me your favor here, I believe her name was Kate Howell. There was an ATF informant in Elohim City.
Carol Howe.
Carol Howell, thank you, who got involved, had a sexual relationship, an intimate relationship with a leader of the Aryan movement, and then ended up becoming an asset. And she was planted in Elohim City at this time, and she was put there with bomb-making materials. And taking what we know from the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, in which we used former Egyptian police officer to create a bomb, and he has the recordings on his phone because he got very suspicious when the FBI told him not to switch the real bomb material for the fake bomb material. So he started recording his phone calls with the FBI. So we know it is fact, it's proven that the FBI had prior knowledge to the first World Trade Center bombing, and that they in fact had a chance to stop it, and that somewhere along the lines, at the very least, something was mishandled.
Yeah.
Okay, if you don't want to go inside job on that one, that's fine. But you have to at least acknowledge the fact that mistakes were made and that there was prior knowledge. So I say that because that was 2 years before this.
Right.
So if you want to make the argument to me that this is beyond the realm of possibility, that's my counterpoint to you. Like, hey, look, it had already happened at this point where we had people on the inside that were greasing the wheels in an attempt to run a sting, and then the sting operation doesn't work. Because let's remember, these Muslim bombers in 1993 were pitched as some masterminds, but they parked their van up against a pillar, and that's why the first World Trade Center bombing is so forgettable, because they put the van in really the one place they shouldn't put it if they wanted to do any damage. And so again, clearly those guys weren't. If you're not smart enough to think of that, how could you have been smart enough to build that bomb? Anyway, we know who built the bomb. Back to this. Carol Howell was involved as an ATF. She mentioned there's a character that often gets forgotten outside of John Doe number 2, who we'll still have to come back to at some point.
Right.
Andy Strassmeyer. His name sounds familiar to you, right?
Familiar.
Nathan?
I'm sure I've heard it over coast to coast.
Not particularly.
So here is a German native who self-appointed himself the security guard of Elohim City, who, after the Oklahoma City bombing, was not questioned in relation to the Oklahoma City bombing until after he had already gotten back to Germany.
He was also nicknamed Andy the German.
Andy the German, yes.
Andy the German.
There are again, if you watch The Secret Life of Timothy McVeigh or The Noble Lie, you will run across a witness, a survivor from the Oklahoma City bombing, who claimed that she saw not Tim McVeigh, but Andy Strassmeyer and 3 other men. At the time, what she thought they were doing was putting internet or cable, but she saw them in the parking garage, and what they had in their hand was what looked like some putty and some very thin wiring, which, Lou, I don't have to tell you that's what they're doing there.
C4 and wires.
It sounded very much like they were setting up some explosives. There was also an instance of Andy Strassmeyer entering a federal building in Texas that he shouldn't have had access to, which the only way he could have gotten into was with a code. So that, again, people bring up the question, well, was it possible that he had access to the Murrah building as well? And the mere fact that a man in question in regards to this, the most major terror attack at that time on American soil, how is it that he manages to get all the way back to Germany before someone questions him? And then they call him over the phone and ask him did you have anything to do with this? That, say what you want, that's not doing your due diligence as an investigator.
No.
That's negligence at the very least. If let's be honest, folks, if you or I are a suspect of any kind of crime, we're not getting out of the country that easily. So that's another interesting part. Now, I will go ahead and say I do not think that he was John Doe number 2. I think that's a very different person. But then there also goes another key point of evidence is yes, I have seen he looks.
He does not look anything like.
He does not look anything like John Doe number 2. He looks like Sling Blade.
Yeah.
What was the? Do either of you guys remember the name of the? Was it Lady Godiva's? What was the name of the strip club where Tim McVeigh was seen 2 days before the bomb?
I can look that up.
Because there is security footage from. Now, this was a creepy part of the investigation, which I can't even just gloss over how the information came across. Because
Lady Godiva.
Lady Godiva. See, look at that.
Go.
See, their memory is on point today. So at Lady Godiva's, the owners did a very weird thing where they had cameras up in the dancers' locker room. So that way, if girls were stealing from each other, if there was a fight, or if some guy came back there, wasn't supposed to be back there, they'd have it all on footage. And one day, there was a fight, a particularly interesting fight. And so the owner, I don't know how legal this is, he sends the tape, he sends the DVD of that day's locker room footage to a friend of his, so he'll look at this, so he'll get to see the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, this friend was a bit of a perv because he watches the entire video, and something far later on in that night that he catches on is some girl walking into the locker room talking to another girl who's off the clock about some weird conversation she just had with a patron. And now the rumor is that these patrons that are being discussed are Tim McVeigh, Andy Strassmeyer, and one more, a third unknown individual. Now, Tim McVeigh claims he was the only, that Andy Strassmeyer was
John Doe
there.
number 2.
Possibly John Doe number 2. I just know that what Tim McVeigh was supposed to have said based on the dancer's words were, he kept telling her how smart he was and how he was going to be famous, and that after April 19th, 1995, you're going to remember me. You'll never forget me.
That's funny.
And this was very odd.
Well, the funny thing that you bring up is intelligence. They wouldn't have even given them the time of day to try out for special forces if he was stupid.
Exactly.
Apparently, this goes back to the strip club thing. Lady Godiva's, apparently a third man, along with Andy the German, they were at the strip club. The third man, people believe to be Michael Breska, and apparently that same camera for the strip club, this is not anything conspiracy per se, was recorded Timothy McVeigh telling a stripper on April 19th, you'll remember me for the rest of your life.
Right, which it was good. I'm glad that you found an article to verify it, so people don't think I'm just blowing smoke up their ass. So wonderful. Now,
what's funny before you continue, this is a law school educational website, so this isn't some bullshit. It talks about conspiracy. This is not some bullshit conspiracy website. Not saying all conspiracy websites are bullshit, but
a lot of them are.
Yeah, it's literally a university law school that has all this information here.
Right. And so, that does a decent amount, in my view, to legitimize the fact, and then this isn't a well-kept secret. We aren't making any of this stuff up about Lady Godiva's. It's been brought up over and over again, and the people involved have been interviewed about it. So now we have the whole John Doe number 2 thing still up there. We have the Andy Strassmeyer in being involved, and so I guess is that where we go next? To the next development here, the next inconsistency, because if you want to point out, because we haven't even gotten to the blast yet.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten to the blast radius, the type of blast, the type of bomb that was supposed to be used, or the original reports from the local and national news saying that a second and a third bomb were found. I remember, because I remember, I watched these clips in videos that were made a long time ago. This was a big deal. Now, another thing, random side point for me to point out, that the people leading this movement were former FBI chiefs, Air Force specialists, people working at schools getting seismic readings from miles away in Tulsa, Oklahoma, picking up two reads on the Richter scale that normally is there to pick up earthquakes. And so they're saying we felt 2 blasts. There's people working across the street.
Also, Tim, in his revelations in prison, has also stated himself that now that this is what's said to inmates at prison. So, I mean, it's interesting to look at, but play devil's advocate. You don't necessarily know that it's secondhand or somebody's changing something. So I'll put that out there before I say it. What they said, there was a second decoy, and in quotations, decoy truck that was loaded up with fertilizer, and 2 trucks are driven. They said the bomb was completed at the warehouse, like the assembly, with a guy named, where's his full name here? Some guy, Poindexter. We were talking about Poindexter earlier, and a couple other folks. So,
which can you, when you get a chance, I can't remember the name of the lake. Do you guys remember the official story is that Tim McVeigh alone went and purchased this Ryder truck. Although the eyewitnesses, because I don't know if you remember, they played off the eyewitness accounts of John Doe number 2 being with Timothy McVeigh by claiming that there was a second group of people, and they found a picture of a guy who kind of looked a little bit like Tim McVeigh, but with a big porn stash, and a buddy that went with him that kind of fit the description of John Doe number 2. And what they did was they said, okay, well, the store people got it wrong. He was remembering these 2 people that came the day after, and he didn't really see Tim McVeigh with somebody else. He saw Tim McVeigh alone the day before. That's the official story.
Right.
That's what they're telling you, that they're putting their words into the store owner's mouth and saying, no, look, sorry, you got it confused. What you meant was you saw these 2 people the next day, and they're in no way related to what's going on here, right? Okay, good. That's what I thought. That sort of thing. But there was this lake that was supposedly where the bomb was built, starting on April 17th, and I need the reason I need to come up with the name of the lake is it would help me figure out. There's an old couple that vacation home lived out there. That the man, the older gentleman, claimed that he had seen the Ryder truck there for over a week. That there had been, or potentially that there was more than one Ryder truck that was up there being worked on, because that doesn't fit the story of them renting it several days beforehand. There is also the footage. You guys really should watch The Noble Lie. I would show you the footage myself, but we already got slapped on the wrist today for showing a muted
copyright
trailer
issues.
So I don't want to get any copyright issues. I don't want to get any trouble. So we want to continue to be able to give you our info and give it for free.
Right.
So
I would like to state though a thing about the 2 blast theory.
What you got on the 2 blasts?
Okay, so in this same thing from the law school, the same brief here.
What law school is it? Can you name the
University of Missouri, Kansas City.
Okay. Good, because it's one of those things where it's like you almost legitimize it by saying it's from a law school, but when you just say it's from a law school, it sounds very senatorial of you.
Yeah, I'm going to. I'll send you the link here. You can pull it up. If you want.
We will get the link posted. So there. While he's doing that, I'll wrap up my thoughts so I don't leave the audience just kind of hanging when it comes to the Ryder truck thing.
Right.
There are theories of multiple trucks. There are people talking about seeing multiple trucks. There are people talking about seeing Ryder trucks on military bases around that time. Which is very odd. Which the official story again is that this footage was of a different Ryder truck from a different point in time, and that the footage on the camera is misdated. That this was actually in October of the year.
Do you expect us to believe the military has misstated cameras?
Do you expect me to believe that the FBI lost tape footage of things? Right. That's ridiculous. But people do. Right. And then the response on that end is,
okay, Uncle Scam.
So you find, Uncle Scam, exactly. So you buy into the original story, the official story of, sorry guys, we lost these tapes, but you know what? You know what will make sure this never happens again is if you give us a bunch more of money and resources. And then we promised, that's why we made the mistakes. It was a lack of resources. That's why we lost footage in the evidence room.
Right.
If we had had more money and more power, there's no way we would have been able to lose that. Like, it blows my mind that that's where we take it. So did you find what you were looking for, Nathan?
Yes, I did. I found it's about the building blowing up, supposedly.
We want stuff.
So the damage to the building was so extensive that many people believe that there were 2 blasts. And it says here the second coming from an ATF secure area where explosives being stored illegally were ignited by the truck bomb. Which, I mean, I think that could be plausible. Very plausible. Because...
Absolutely. So that there are multiple accounts of
seismic activity. It also states seismic activity and witness testimony. Definitely give the 2 blast theories a clout.
Yeah. So there are. Oh man, it just gave me a different link that you sent me. It was not the proper link. So I will try.
The first link or the second link?
I will try that again here in 1 second. But so what we were talking about with this 2 blast theory, you mentioned there being a stockpile of weapons. So yeah, they're not supposed to be any weapons. The ATF was not supposed to have anything in the Murrah building. But there are 2 instances reported on where the search and rescue was halted. People are left trapped in the building screaming so that secure files could be removed. Because there was paperwork there that people shouldn't, that were classified. I mean, it's as simple as it is. There were for your eyes only kind of things there, and so everything was halted while agents come out and they just load documents onto these trucks. And the other time that it was halted was to remove the weapons cache that the ATF had of grenades and submachine guns and all this stuff that's not supposed to be there.
Right. So
yes, technically maybe that could be part of your second blast, but I think from here, this is where we need none of us are scientists, so again, I'm going to have to suggest that people watch things like A Noble Lie, go look it up for yourselves so you can see a real scientist tell you why this blast radius and these things don't make sense. If you wanna go to Alex Jones for your info, this is one he loves to tell people how he broke the story wide open on the Oklahoma bombing.
I would suggest Coast to Coast or something along those lines.
Something along those lines. Well, this is one of the rare occasions where I will say that this was in early 90s. This was early on Alex Jones a little bit. He does have some of his stuff together. The things that he brings to the table make sense. For instance, all of the debris being across the street. People working for days getting that debris field cleaned from across the street. So, and the idea of there being structural damage to a building. So if you think about it, no matter what you put in that truck bomb should not, what should be released off of that explosion, the only thing that fundamentally really that should be destroyed outside of windows and stuff like that.
Can you pull up pictures? What do you think pulling up pictures on Google of the building?
I had a picture up already. I will bring it back up.
I mean, I'm not obviously watching.
Right, yeah, no, fair enough. But so when you look at the picture itself, you'll wonder. But if you think about it this way, what
explosions propel things out.
Propel things out in a circular motion. Okay, so propel things outward. So, but also if you think about what was in this bomb, all that should have been blasted outwards really was air and heat.
Yeah.
And so what could have possibly been in that truck that could have caused something like that to happen? And so can we pull up, Nathan, the official version? Because the official version has changed several times when it comes to this. It's changed 3 or 4 times because the initial report, the bomb, that people were instantly able to say that's not possible. And so what they did was they kept adding the weight of the bomb. They added to the weight of the bomb several times to try to make it more plausible, more realistic. But the reports of there being multiple times, you heard it, they were reporting that a second bomb has been found and deactivated, but there's a third bomb still in the building. There are eyewitness accounts of bomb squad trucks being parked across the street from the Murrah building before the bomb took place.
Mm.
There's reports of ATF agents all of a sudden just swarming on the scene, even though none of them were at work. So there are some interesting things talking about here. I pulled those two things kind of out of left field from what we were talking about, but
good nonetheless.
It's still information that's sort of, as we talk about these things, more little facts get jogged and you just sort of reel it all in. But when it comes to this bomb, when we get the info pulled up, I'm going to pull up the picture again for everybody to see.
Well, in terms of the bomb, what do you want pulled up?
I need to know what bomb was built, the official stories version of the bomb that was built.
So, a Ryder truck containing in excess of 4,800 pounds of an ammonia, nitrate fertilizer, nitromethane, and diesel fuel mixture on the north side detonated at 9:02 a.m.
Perfect. On the north face of the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which also, to go deeper on a rabbit hole conspiracy, it just, the North Face company, every time, I don't know about you guys, but every time I've seen someone wearing a North Face jacket, all I can ever think of is the Murrah building getting bombed. I know it's got nothing to do with anything,
right?
But it's the only two times I've ever heard that
North
word.
Face.
The only time I've heard the word North Face. And so part of me believes if I ever took the time to look back, I'd find some connection to the Murrah building behind somebody who runs that company. So the ammonium nitrate bomb. So what I wanted from you was the weight, because I couldn't remember. 4,800 was what I remembered, but as I told you guys,
right,
the number changed so often. I didn't want to spit it out there and have it be revoked. So 4,800 pounds. And now, so you guys experience with ammonia, all right? We've all had it. I don't know if you guys ever had cats or anything where they fill up the litter box. It smells. It gets so
bad.
I was
Real
once
bad.
in order to.
You don't remember my cats pissing all over the place?
I do. So I had you guys know this. In the summers in college, I was a private contractor at times. I did a lot of yard work, did a lot of landscaping, tore out the inside of some house, did some demo. And in one project, we had to replace the carpet, and the person who had lived there wasn't supposed to have animals, and they had 6 or 7 cats. And at some point, I guess, had decided to just stop taking care of them because the cat urine had saturated the carpet so much that it soaked through the underneath carpet, that padding underneath to the woodwork. We had to pull out all the nail boards. Everything had to come out. And then for 2 days, we had to spray the whole thing with ammonia to try to just cancel some stuff out. So It took us 2 days. We're talking maybe I don't even know. I can't even tell you how many square feet. Let's say 10,000. Not a big place. 1-story house, little place. Yeah. I'm not an architect. I can't just think of how many square feet it was. Whatever. It was a small place. Took 2 days for us because of the air, the quality of the air, and how bad it was messing with us. So if you guys think about that, if 4,800 pounds ammonium nitrate bomb, it is physically impossible
for that to not smell.
For not even that, for the search and rescue to have been there and been active in the timing that it was. So a couple of students set off an ammonium nitrate bomb on campus, and it took, I can't remember the date but it took about an hour before anybody could get to the scene because they had to let the ammonia dissipate and move on. And so that part kind of makes this whole story reek to me. I believe you used the term earlier, the decoy van. I believe that's sort of what was going on here, that the bombs were already in place in the building and that the Ryder truck was more of the decoy so people could see that. Again, if you want to
assume that it was all done by the truck.
Yeah, if you want to go the Patsy route, is this a scenario where Tim McVeigh thought he was running a sting operation on the white supremacist group in Elohim City and ended up being the fall guy? Maybe, I don't know, but it's crazy how the two extra bombs in the building and the John Doe number 2 have completely been whitewashed from our memory as far as this story goes.
Right.
Even though there is physical evidence, at the very least, to support that those bombs were there, and there are multiple eyewitnesses. Now, again, any good detective will tell you an eyewitness account isn't nearly as valuable as they'd like to tell you it is.
Right.
Because the human memory
is shit.
Go type in Mandela effect right now, Stop and pause this, type in Mandela effect, and then come back with a new perspective on the human memory, because it cannot be trusted.
Or watch Brain Games.
But when you have 24 people all saying that they saw the two guys and giving an accurate description, at that point, that's when it becomes a little bit more believable. And not to mention, we allocated so many resources. To draw back to another episode, our Propeller Pirates episode, Lou, we looked into skyjacking. Nate, you might have listened in on that when we talked about DB Cooper. Okay, how long did the FBI waste resources looking for DB Cooper?
30, 40 years.
I think they just closed the case.
They just closed the case for DB Cooper.
Like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
You're making my point for me essentially here with that. They just recently, it's been what? It was
like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Like 45 years or something? 40-something years looking for DB Cooper. After 3 months, they pretend John Doe 2 doesn't exist.
Right.
Now, why is that? Under what scenario?
They closed out last month.
Key bono here. Under what scenario would the FBI want to stop an investigation? And why, is the reason that we can't find any of these tapes that show us the building, that show us the Ryder truck, are they not available to us because they would tell us who John Doe number 2 is?
Possibly.
Is it possible that John Doe number 2 was, let's say, Tim McVeigh's handler?
Yeah.
And that if it would be, again, a situation
Spy Master.
Let's take it from those of you who follow RJ on 60 Grit. He does not adhere to our theory of things being predetermined or things being planned out. He's more the opportunist route.
Right.
So he would tell you, I would think, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and he can feel free to correct me in a couple of days when we go on air. He would probably tell you that this was a sting gone wrong and that the FBI would be covering its tracks, that they weren't complicit. They didn't the FBI never had any intention. Nowhere on our end was there an intention to bomb the Murrah building, but they were trying to run a sting operation that failed, and so they covered it up. And that is very plausible as well. I mean, one way something was covered up here is basically what I'm getting at. I don't know that I want to go to the extent that Tim McVeigh was working for his government, but you can't argue with the result. The government got what they wanted from this.
Yeah.
Not, and I hate to throw that blanket term out there. There are plenty of great people in our government. There are plenty of great Americans. I love this country. I want to see us do well. But you can't fix a problem unless you are willing to talk about the problem being there.
Right.
And so,
like addiction.
What is exactly? And so what is happening here? Under what circumstances? What would be another reason for them to call off that manhunt and to just sort of just blame it all on Tim McVeigh without further investigation?
This is the exact kind of play that we see in the CIA overthrow of dictatorships and things.
Well, it reminds me a lot, and I hate to be that guy, and I'm probably going to get a couple of thumbs down right about now. So when we see them on the feed tomorrow, it's okay.
All your fault.
This reminds me, and you guys probably might not like it either, this reminds me a lot of the Reichstag fire, okay?
Okay.
You have a scenario where Hermann Göring, a mentally disabled individual, is blamed of burning down Parliament and basically propelling. Hitler gets what he needs. He gets to move forward from there. Mm-hmm. False flag attack. It's a key one to go to. And this sort of, you could see, if you wanted to look at it from that perspective, you could see a lot of the similarities here, because again, whether or not we were pulling the strings, you can't deny who got what they needed here. Like the Greek saying, the key bono, who benefits. Figure out, you want to know who's to blame, figure out who benefits. That's what any detective would do when they find a spouse has been murdered.
Yep.
That's a lot of times why the other spouse is usually the prime suspect, because it's either a crime of passion or it's a crime of profit.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these things, it's the same thing. It's passion or profit. could be a mix of two. You could get
Where's
someone.
the money go?
You get someone who pays
For passion.
You get like the Fritz Thiessens of the world who paid for Adolf. They made a profit off of Adolf Hitler's passion. So was there someone out there making a profit off of Tim McVeigh's passion, or was Tim McVeigh's passion made up in order for him to get inside of a group, and then he thought he was going to bust that group? Or was it all just to make that group look bad and just to make American patriots and right wings look nutty, and to put the idea into our mind 20 years ago that these people shouldn't have guns, or that we need to lock down
as mentally,
and how
mentally dangerous,
and setting the stage now for this term domestic terrorism. So now how this applies, the reason we're talking about this stuff now is when you think about
can I add a little caveat?
Always.
Because if you think about domestic terrorism, you can trace that to the next chain in diagnosing these people as mentally deranged.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And you
all it takes is that next step of classification, saying mentally dangerous.
Exactly. That is perfect. You segued for me right there, because that's exactly where I was going with it. Why this pertains now is because when you hear things about both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton wanting to censor the internet because of radicalization on the internet, what people don't understand, people hear these things and they think, well, that doesn't apply to me. That only applies to Ahmed down the street because he's Muslim and they might suspect him of being a terrorist. But because of Tim McVeigh, you and you and you and you guys listening, we are all on that same level, because Tim McVeigh was not a religious radical. Or maybe he was, if you want to view that Aryan supremacy, if you want to buy into all that.
He considered himself agnostic and an atheist. There's a quote that he said, well, if I'm going, it was something along the lines of like, well, if I'm going to hell, at least I'll be in good company. So it wasn't.
Well, but that was, okay, to add more context to that, he was talking about the casualties of war, and people were asking him about whether or not he felt bad for the people that died, because that is a quote directly. That is like the one clip you can find on the 60-minute interview, and what he's saying is, yeah, I would have good company. There are plenty of soldiers and generals. Basically, essentially saying that there are a lot of good. If what I did puts me in hell, then there will be a lot of good men in hell. Essentially trying to take the.
And he specifically also stated he will improvise, adapt, and overcome if it turns out there's an afterlife. So,
which has been my strategy too. I'll cross that bridge when I get there.
Yeah,
fiery brimstone bridge.
I know Aryan supremacy and white supremacy and stuff typically have a religious base, but in this case, in terms of the bombing, and I'm talking more not so conspiracy on this level here, and I think also having a good chunk to do with obviously Waco and Ruby Ridge, even looking in conspiracy too. It's nowhere near any sort of religious attack or anything along those lines.
Yeah, agreed. And that again sort of just kind of validates what it is that we're saying here, that you don't have to be. People don't understand how easily they can be labeled a terrorist.
Right.
It really isn't going to take much.
All it takes is saying. Well, I don't even want to say it, because that's all it takes. Look at what we've seen where people have gotten arrested off their Facebook
Just
posts.
go follow our path. Exactly what I was going to say. Go follow our path. Go back 2 weeks ago. Listen to us talking about these Facebook posts where people are getting arrested for saying that, the cops in my town are next. Better not let me catch y'all. Da, da, da. Okay, people are getting arrested for what they're saying on Facebook. So that this is how it all ties in. The reason domestic terrorism is a thing is because Tim McVeigh went and bombed the Murrah building. And so the reason you have to watch what you say now, it is just as much to do with Tim McVeigh in 95 as it has to do with the Dallas shooting. Okay. Yeah. What people don't understand is we didn't just get to this point. Okay. It started back then. The door was opened back then, and things have been all read and reaction since then. And that's that's why it's important, I think, for us to know and for us to understand if we were given the actual story here. And that's why we were, I don't know about you guys, I was 7 when this happened.
I wasn't even 3.
Okay?
I was going on 9.
So it's hard to blame our millennial generation here for not looking at this and crying out and for not knowing Ruby. You know, a lot of people, when you ask them, because we did this in preparation for these episodes, trying to figure out, what kind of audience we had, what their interest level was, and it's sort of what invigorated me to keep pushing this was how little people knew. We had Buddy on Bread and Circuses. We asked him about it. Well, we had him on for the Waco Ruby Ridge episode. Yeah, because he was essentially playing the millennial audience there.
It was actually kind of beautiful. He found out what we were going to talk about, and he wanted to stay for it to find out stuff. You know?
Yeah, because he had no knowledge. He had never even heard of Ruby Ridge before.
Right.
He knew something happened at Waco. He couldn't tell you what. And now a lot of people, when
I remember seeing the tanks drive around the building on the news when I was a kid.
Yeah,
that was a big thing.
Yep, Waco. Yeah, I remember the 90s news. It was Waco and OJ.
Yeah.
And Tim McVeigh. Yeah. And
Tupac getting shot.
Oh, I don't remember seeing that much.
I remember seeing that.
I don't remember Tupac being shot.
Supposedly, it's Suge. That's a big conspiracy. Is Suge.
Well, then there's the other one.
Suge was helping him fake his death.
That he helped fake his death.
Yeah.
The cop on his deathbed claimed,
that
I was paid to help Tupac fake his death. But
conspiracy aside, and I won't stray far. Is whatever Suge has come to him, I'm pretty glad for the most part. That dude is just bad.
He wasn't a nice person. Yeah.
See, y'all should be careful because what you say on the internet,
Suge's
you can be held accounted for now.
No, and I'm not saying
We're not saying go kill him.
No,
that's he's got his
karma's a bitch.
Yes,
karma's a bitch, and he was not a very nice person to a lot of people.
Yep, but yeah. So Suge Knight, see, that's why you gotta love this show. Where else can you hear about Suge Knight on a Tim McVeigh episode? So the moral of the story is we have a lot more questions than answers. If you listen to us and you came in here tonight with just armed only with the official story, expecting us to answer questions for you, I apologize. That may have been misleading. We don't pretend to have any answers. Our goal simply is to ask questions to get conversation started because, again, you can't fix a problem until it's addressed and until you figure out whether or not it's even a problem.
And I would like to say this, regardless if it was if it was the official story with Tim McVeigh attacking due to Waco and stuff, or, any of this conspiracy stuff has valid points, which I think presented tonight, it can. It's still heartbreaking and sad to see so much death for either cause, either way.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of innocent people and children,
especially
nonetheless.
children.
As a social worker, hearing the children, that died there, and there's a famous picture. You don't have to pull it up where a firefighter is holding, I think, a 2-year-old who was still alive at that point, but was in the bombing. Her clothes had been burned off, I think.
Jesus.
And she ended up passing away though. So that picture alone, that's just, to either way, whether it's the material we presented tonight or the official story, and that goes for any conspiracy.
Right.
Like I will say, a lot of people like to point out Newtown too. Now a lot of that also is people say your daughter didn't die; it was all fake. But point is, heartbreak for either way in this situation.
Right.
Yeah, because the Murrah bombing actually happened.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
I wasn't there, but I was alive.
And so I just brought up another screen share here. Before we go, I thought something. This was a thing that I wanted to bring up because I don't even know if your research led you guys across the path of Officer Terry Yakey.
No.
No, it did not.
Officer Yakey was a first responder at Oklahoma City who was in the process of writing a traffic ticket.
You said
When he
Terry
heard-
Yankee?
Terry Yakey. So it is Yeakey. So Officer Yakey was a officer who was writing a traffic ticket down the street when he heard the bombs, and he dropped the ticket. He dropped the ticket where he stood.
Literally dropped the ticket pad and ran
And
off.
took off and started helping people escape. And so the interesting thing about Officer Yakey was that he was found dead in a supposed. Oh my God! It's hard for me to even get through this.
Strange
without.
death of Terry Yankee.
Yeah. So his suicide, in which he slit his wrist, slit his neck, and then put the knife in the glove box of his car, and then supposedly crawled half a mile so he could die under a tree. And yeah.
Why
So
wouldn't he just drive to the tree and then do it?
why
I'm sorry, I know you're
wait? Why not wait till you get to the tree and stab yourself at
That's
the
what I'm
tree?
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Why would you crawl like that? Why wouldn't you? What the fuck?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, my thing is, he was said to have slit his wrist and neck. The wrist thing, I mean, you know, you're going to eventually lose up a lot of blood from there. I can't say from experience,
Right.
obviously. But to slit your neck and then be able
To crawl?
and then have enough to shoot yourself in the head.
He shot himself in the head?
Yeah, inside of the head at an unusual angle. And no weapon was found at the scene of body, no investigation, no fingerprints.
Well, yes, he
No
somehow left that in his fucking glove box, too. I was being facetious.
Yeah. And
That's just, what the shit?
so, and again, you'll have to, I'm going to show this. You guys will have to forgive the Wikipedia-ness of this link because it's hard to find information about this guy, but I want the name.
Wikipedia, though, I mean, it's, for the most part, it's pretty legit nowadays.
Which, it has some stigma with it, but so Terry Yakey, you can find articles about him, but the guy you won't find a lot of stuff about is Kenneth Michael Trenadu, which one of the bigger truthers in the Oklahoma City bombing movement came across this whole thing by accident because his brother was a former Vietnam War vet who was addicted to some drugs and got in trouble robbing some banks, named Kenneth Michael Trenadu, who was, again, an odd suicide. He was found dead in his cell, but with weird things like, so his brother had to put in several requests for the body to finally be sent, and when it was sent, it had they had put makeup all over it. So Jesse Trenadu, who is a lawyer, an attorney in Utah, he wiped the makeup off, saw all the bruises. His brother's feet had been smashed in. It was reported that during the autopsy, like a liter's worth of cola had been found in his body, which Lou, you will know this. Caffeine is used in torture interrogation because it enhances the pain. Up. Yeah, it keeps you up and it enhances the pain.
Yeah.
So there were clear signs here of this guy being tortured in his prison cell. But again, it's ruled a suicide. Jesse Trenadu, this attorney, when he went to investigate, he found that all the backlogs involving his brother, either the logs themselves were missing or pages from the logs that may have references, but they were all basically there. He could find no evidence of his brother being in the system there, even though he knew that he was going to talk to us the day before.
Right.
And,
except inmate number.
I don't even think even up to that extent, but yeah. So
because they said, I know you said this, but they thought he was an accomplice, Kenneth Trenadu.
Well, and exactly. That's where I was going with it. The thought was that Tim McVeigh reached out to Jesse Trenadu and said that, I heard about what happened to your brother, and I apologize. I think he was killed because he was mistaken for someone else that was supposed.
Guthrie.
Yeah.
Guthrie.
Yep. Richard Guthrie, who was supposed to be involved in the Oklahoma City. So this guy with Jesse Trenadu, it didn't start. He did not start out after the FBI and the ATF. He simply wanted justice for his brother. Why was my brother murdered? And he said after the however many times it took, where it just, no matter where he went, it kept leading him back to Oklahoma City. And so he finally, that's when he got to the point where he turned his attention to Oklahoma City. And so these are two things that I would suggest to you at home, that you would look into these little subtle, oh yeah, Nate's got the, oh, you know what? Yeah, I'll pull up the pictures for you.
Jesus.
We will, yeah, let's do that real quick. Because you guys, I did not think that those would be on the internet like that.
There are plenty.
Did you just search his name?
Yep, just search his name.
We've got a good one coming right up here for you, folks. You want to see? Show Lou real quick.
That's funny.
Show Lou real quick so we can see. Oh, here we go. Here's a good one.
He looks like Ron fucking Swanson.
He does look a little bit like Ron Swanson. Oh, that's a poor image. Oh, here we go. Yeah, this allows you to see more of it right there. So, yeah, Ron Swanson. Here, I'm going to pull this up for the folks at home. They can get a view, of this is what he looks like.
These photos are graphic.
Some graphic images there.
Right.
For those of you just listening to us, I'm not forgetting about you, but you can see clear bruises and cuts and abrasions all around the forehead and the eyes. Obviously, the big scars in the center of his chest are post-mortem. Yeah. Those are autopsy scars, so don't go too crazy there. But there is clearly looks like some foul play, because I have never attempted to commit suicide, but I don't see how you go about leaving all those bruises on your own face and forehead.
The only way I could ever see something similar, and it wouldn't even be that close, is if you decided to jump off of a high story of a building.
But in
that case, are you
that would be a lot different.
Are you going to be getting cuts?
I was thinking, honestly, the only way
you're going to be found hanging in your cell.
Yeah. The only way I could think that you could really end up looking like that after slitting your throat or wrist is if you did it at the top of a couple sets of stairs.
Yeah, and you slipped,
fell down,
tumbled around. So yeah. So those are just some other. I saved those for the end because I knew these were some of the outliers that we didn't. Until we get to do this as a profession, right? We have to do our research around our work schedules, and so these are some things that I came across because I've been researching this for a while now.
Right.
That's why I was so excited, and thank you again, Nathan, for bringing this topic up as something that we should discuss.
I would also like to say the guy that they supposedly mistaken him for, Richard Guthrie, was also found almost a year later.
Dead.
They said he committed suicide too. Before, mind you, a couple of days before he was supposed to go do a national interview.
Right.
Yeah, of course. Just like the John, look it up. Is it John Paul Hammer? I'm gonna double check. The Tim McVeigh's former roommate in the clink there. He, after granting an interview in which he told the story about the major and that Tim McVeigh predicted that his death would be faked, he then was put in isolation and
David Paul Hammer.
David Paul. Thank you. So. Apologies there, folks. David Paul Hammer, Tim McVeigh's former cellmate, was then not allowed to make any outgoing call. He wasn't even allowed to talk to his lawyer there for a while after making that statement. We mentioned earlier the things that Terry Nichols said about being unable to tell the truth about what he knew. And that's coming from a guy who he's not getting out ever. So it's very interesting that at this point,
he's still
the way that we've been led to believe that this game works. If you have information that are helpful to the authorities, they will work with you. So why is Terry Nichols not able to lighten his load by giving this inside information that he warns about? He says that there's more to this story than anyone will ever know. And so if that information were to benefit our government and our people, why would that not be a bigger attempt to be made to bring that to light? It leads you to believe that whatever information he's holding it because the people that are keeping him in prison are the ones that benefit from him not letting that info out. That is a way definitely of looking at it.
Definitely.
So again, I apologize to you folks that came here looking for answers. We undoubtedly gave you a million more questions to come. And as you dive in and do your own research, you're only going to find more questions. Again, we bring these things up because we're trying to open up people's perspectives and have them start to look into these things. If you
don't take my word for it, hop in a book.
Yeah, do your own research. Prove if we are wrong, prove us wrong. I love nothing more than being wrong when it comes to these things. I would much rather think that everything is on the level, everything is as it seems, and we are being told the truth. But until we start opening up and having discussions about things and starting back with our own personal history, even if you just want to understand the world that you live in, if you're 30, you need to understand what has happened in the last 30 years.
Yeah.
You aren't who you are today based on what you did yesterday. You are based on every single day you've ever lived up until that point, and we are the same as a country, and honestly, as a species, as humans, we have to keep it all. It's all been a progression, us getting here. This didn't happen overnight. So if we want to fix it, we have to understand how we broke it.
Also, if you do believe us and feel very wronged about the government, don't necessarily go blow up a building like Timothy McVeigh.
Yeah, that should be the other case in point. Don't be misguided with what we're saying and telling you or what you're thinking and feeling, because in Tim McVeigh's case, if everything is on the level and everything is as they say it is, he got the opposite of what he wanted.
Right. That's not how you create positive, lasting change.
Exactly. More innocents died. That there were more casualties that had no need to die. And if his attack was aimed towards a tyrannical government that had too much power, he succeeded in giving them more power than they had ever had.
Right.
So keep that in mind. If you're not happy with it, the beautiful thing about our democracy is you're supposed to have the ability to change it as a citizen. So we all suggest that you apply that route. Go and vote for things other than your president. Go vote.
Don't just vote based on your political party. Look into who you're voting for. If you're voting for this person and they espouse things you don't believe in, then why the fuck are you voting for them?
And on a bigger level, stop just voting for people, all right? Go in and vote for issues.
Yes.
These things, you have a direct control, supposedly, over whether or not certain issues gets passed. Go in and vote. And then if you notice that you've been playing the game the way you're supposed to be playing it, and it's not working for you, then start writing congressmen, start writing people. Take all the legal revenues laid out before you to try to get your point across and try to do some good in the world. Do not go out and try to be a lone wolf nut. And and the old saying goes, if there are 3 people in a room talking about overthrowing the government, 2 of them probably work for the government. So be careful who you talk to, and don't let people radicalize you, or you'll never be able to hear stuff like this on the internet again.
Yeah. The lone nut bust.
And the 3 of us lone nuts are going to say goodnight now. And we thank you for joining us tonight. And hopefully we'll be back with another episode next weekend. We'll see if our credentials get revoked.
Don't forget to wipe.